Hello, everyone. My name is Omar Hatamle. I'm the author of Between Brains. It's a book that discusses the evolution of artificial intelligence and its impact on the future of jobs, society, economy, and the ethical implications of that emerging technology. I'm very excited to be part of your event today and join Schneider Electric Innovation Day. So, as a society, we tend to talk about the progress we've made as a species in the last 50 years, 100 years. We went from transporting on horses to landing a man on the moon. So the question is, what is society? What is the world going to look like in the next 25 or 50 years? And that's when things become much more complicated. If you look at the incredible evolution in technology, it's very difficult not only to predict what's happening in 50 years, but probably what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Recent research estimates that 60% approximately of the jobs in the next decade, they haven't been invented yet. So that tells you how fast things are moving as we go along. If we look also at exponential growth in computing, if we look at the 50s, for example, when integrated chips were invented, originally only 2 transistors used to fit there. And now you could put up to 20 billion transistors in that integrated chip. And the challenge now is we're reaching the capability of the spacing between transistors. So we need to look into a different technology. And people are looking at quantum and looking into different capacities. But there is an incredible evolution in the computational field beyond anything we've seen before until now. So if we look at the robotic market, we think in about 3 or 4 years, it's going to be about $70 billion in market. And so that also comes with some challenges because a lot of processes will be automated. People potentially might lose some jobs. Some studies we've seen in 2050, they estimate about 50 million jobs will be lost in manual labor. And that's a discussion we've been discussing since the Industrial Revolution when it first came out. Originally, it was disruptive, but eventually it resulted in much better jobs and people readapted and got different jobs at different places. The question now is, with the emergence of this incredible robotics, how is the market going to look like? And obviously, they will be disrupted to the job markets for manual labor. But the key challenge we have right now with the big difference is actually artificial intelligence. So for the first time in history, we're not only competing with manual labor, but we are competing with intellect. So any job that's intellectual, it will be also competed with this incredible advanced and smart systems. Look, for example, in the medical field, recent research has found that radiologists, and when compared to some of the I consider basic artificial intelligence systems, the artificial intelligence systems was able to do 8 to 9% better diagnosis than some of the best radiologists in the field. So imagine the advancement and the progression when these things become very advanced. How would that affect the medical field? How would that affect engineering fields? How would it affect the legal fields and so on? So you can see not only applicable to manual labor, but also all the intellectual jobs will be affected by that factor, by artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is not something new. We've been discussing that for a while. It's been in existence since the 50s. So why now? And I think it's due to 3 main tenets. The first one is the algorithms. So now we have much more advanced, much more capable algorithms compared to the basic archaic systems that we had before, single layer. So now we have deep layer, multi-layer, very advanced systems that we actually can handle much more complex situations. But also, the more advanced these algorithms are, they need more computational power. So the computational power, typically with a computer, it runs in series. So you have a calculation, you finish, you go to the next calculation, and so on. So with the core of the computers, basically we have dual core, quad core, 8. So basically it enables you to do multiple ones at the same time. But the gaming industry came up with the GPUs, which enables you to have thousands, 4,000 to 5,000 calculations done simultaneously at the same time. So that by itself was able to transform the computational systems and advance the field of artificial intelligence, which requires heavy computational power when we have advanced algorithms. And then obviously the emergence of data. So now we have amazing, vast amount of data that actually we can leverage on. So artificial intelligence without data cannot do anything. It uses the data to be able to learn, adapt, and being able to create what we know as artificial intelligence. So all these 3 systems, algorithms, computing, advanced computing, and big data were the key tenets of what created the modern artificial intelligence. And by the way, we're still in the early stages of artificial intelligence. we're going to reach general artificial intelligence in a few years, and then we're still probably a couple of decades away from super artificial intelligence, which is by itself, it's a different field. So we have a lot of emerging technologies. We have autonomy, we have fintech, 3D, drones. So all these are new emerging technologies that all of us are dealing with. But what happens when you start combining some of these emerging technologies to create new products? And that's when we're talking about a company, for example, called Telexistent. That's a company that combined a lot of these emerging systems into one. So they used artificial intelligence, advanced virtual reality, Internet of Things, 5G, and robotics to be able to create an avatar for people. So you can actually control a robot and feel what the robot is feeling with advanced sensors. So in a different country, in a different continent even. So imagine the implications on medicine, on tourism, on business. So by combining them, you can create new waves of capability beyond what we've had so far to date. The interesting thing about these advanced systems is also the collective learning capabilities and aspects of it. So us as humans, when I read something or when I learn something, it's only me that's learning, right? But when you're dealing with these advanced systems, it's a collective learning. So if we have 1,000 cars driving on the street right now, 1,000 driverless cars, whatever one car learns, all of them will learn the same thing. So that also there's an exponential curve of learning from these smart artificial intelligence systems that's beyond anything we've seen actually to date. So let's start transforming and comparing the population to that advanced technologies that we're having. So what's interesting is from the beginning of human evolution until almost the year 1800, about the population of the Earth was less than 1 billion. And in the span of 200 years, we went from less than 1 billion to about 7.5 billion. And the UN projects actually in the year 2050, we're going to have about maybe 10 billion people in population. So, and that's, I think it's missing that disruption in the medical field that's happening, the incredible technologies that are emerging. So when you consider, for example, the advances in biotech, advances in artificial intelligence in the medical applications, the 3D printing where you can print actually a heart or an organ, the nanobots will be emerging in the next 15 years. So when we combine all these kind of things, I think we'll take the current projections from 10 billion to much above that number. And that the average span of human life will also be extending substantially. So that's going to be taken into account. So what happens when you do that and you compare it to the loss of jobs or the less amount of influence that people will have in the job market because of these incredible advances in technology we have. So because of that, we need to look into the future economic models, because the current economic models do not sustain with this incredible increase in advanced technology and the increase in population that we have. So we need to explore different venues for that. But also, we need to actually bridge the gap between academic institutions and the industry. So right now we're producing people from colleges, and they might not be as equipped as they need to be in the future. If somebody goes to a 5-year engineering degree, by the year he finishes 5 years, in 5 years the technology has advanced so much that some of the technologies that have learned is probably antiquated or not used anymore. So there need to be constant bridge or constant communication lines between academia and industry to be able to produce engineers, scientists, or employees that are ready to start becoming useful from the first day of work. And also, interesting thing is lines are becoming blurry between industry. Before, technology that was invented for the manufacturing industry, for the car manufacturer, or for the medical field, it used to be applicable typically for that specific field, but now that lines are blurring. So a technology that's being used or invented in one field could actually have vast implications and applicability across all the fields in the industry. So look at the artificial intelligence. It has implications in the legal industry, in finance, medicine, transportation, agriculture, defense. It's vast. It's becoming ubiquitous and across every single industry that we have here. Same thing with the 3D printing. 3D printing was originally intended for producing components. Now it's being used to produce food. It's being used to produce houses and building houses and buildings. It's being used in the clothing industry. It's being used in medical applications to create the organs. So a single industry that was created for one field, it's actually has implication across all the industries as well. So we need to keep that into account. Also, is when we strategize about the future markets, we need to not anchor ourselves with the limitations of today's technology. Unfortunately, as humans, we tend to think in a linear fashion, and we're living in an exponential world right now. So when we think about the future, don't anchor yourself with today's technology and the limitations of today's technology, but try to extrapolate what is the state of technology or what emerging technologies will be in space or in place in the next 5 years or 10 years. And by doing that, actually, you'll be able to make much better predictions and better be able to strategize about what's happening. And it's not an easy thing, right? It's very complicated. So, but I think there's some tools that will get you closer to what the state of things will be. So if you start looking, for example, at the number of publications in certain fields, at the investments being put on by venture capital and institutions, by the number of startups in certain fields, by the patents, by the number of graduates graduating from certain technical disciplines, by the amount of revenue. So all these kind of things will be able to give you a better insight, a better idea of what's going to be happening at the micro level or the macro level. And by doing that, actually, it will give you different insight into where the next emerging technologies will be. But also, it's important that you immerse yourself with what's happening in the startup world and the incubators, because these entities typically are familiar with what's happening at the small scale. So sometimes it could be corporations working and spending millions of dollars in solving a problem, when that problem specifically could already be existing somewhere else in a startup. So if you know what's happening in these fields, you can align and just get something or a product or technology that might be able to solve a problem that you've been dealing with and struggling for a long time. So by doing that, if you start connecting the dots and you become a good strategist, it will completely put you in a position to be able to lead the competition. So not be reactive, but be proactive. You always have to be proactive in today's environment. If you are reactive, you're going to be left behind and you're going to be irrelevant in today's environment and how we're advancing in technology. So when it comes to implementing these emerging technologies, it needs to be done in an incremental approach. You can, for example, start a small unit and start vetting these technologies. And technology is going to be different in the way it's applied from one organization to another. You cannot just get a technology and adapt it fast scale. You have to take a technology, maybe adapt it, change it, and modify it to fit your business line. And then the more success you're having, the better it's reacting. You start implementing it at a wider scale across your organization. Diversity is really an essential thing. We tend to do group think across all the organizations. When you have 20 engineers try to solve a problem, they tend to think in the same context. When you have 20 business people, 20 lawyers. So the more diverse your group is, I think you'll be able to get away from the groupthink mentality and be able to approach things in a different way. Just to give you an example, there is a advanced electric bike company in the Netherlands. And about 70 to 80% of the bikes were being returned because they were being damaged during transportation. So all the engineers got together and started thinking, okay, how can we make the material stronger and more class better on transportation and more capable? And then a person came and he had no technical discipline or background. And he said, instead of spending all this time and effort trying to improve or make it stronger, the bicycles, why don't we just print a copy of a TV on the box? And people are shipping these products will assume that you're shipping televisions or advanced electronics, and they will be more careful in the shipping process. And in fact, that was true. They were able to reduce the damage to a portion that was sustainable. Otherwise, the company would have been completely out of business. So that tells you sometimes innovation doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't require a lot of effort. It could be as simple idea as what I just mentioned in the example here. Also, your portfolio, you have to diversify your portfolio as much as possible. Look at Amazon, for example. They started selling books to selling products. Now they're one of the leaders in the web service arena. They're leaders in the content and media production. They're looking into banking. So the portfolio is so diversified, and I think that's a model that the other industries can follow as well. So acceptation is a biological term. It's referred to something that was created for one function, and then it was co-opted for a completely different use. And to give you an example, it's birds. So the feathers on the birds were not intended for flying. They were intended for thermal regulation. And with biological evolution, eventually these feathers enable the birds to fly. And basically, it's completely different function from what it was intended from. So the same term could be actually implemented in the business world. Just let me give you an example. There was a car mechanic in Argentina. they were having dinner, and they were trying to open one of the wine bottles, and the cork fell inside the bottle, and they started discussing how can they get the cork out of the bottle without breaking it. So this car mechanic came up with a brilliant idea. He put a plastic bag, he inflated it, and was able to get the cork out of the bottle and successfully without damaging the bottle itself. And then he left the dinner and started thinking, that was a neat concept. How can I apply it in a different capacity? So he started talking to a friend of his who was a gynecologist, and he eventually came up with a brilliant device that was actually credited with being able to help with the birth of newborn in developing countries where they don't have access to medical advances. So imagine a small idea that was intended for getting a cork out of the bottle. It was accepted and modified and into a medical field, and was credited with saving thousands of people's lives when in the delivery process when they didn't have advanced access to medical systems. So innovation is actually two fields. There is revolutionary innovation and there is evolutionary innovation. So revolutionary is what happens in the smartphones. We jumped ahead from the conventional cell phones that you used to have, to these incredible advances with the smartphone that we have right now. And then evolutionary is when we have iPhone 4, 5, and 6. So it's small increments in innovation. The problem is revolutionary innovation, it's almost 96 or 97% end up failing. It takes a lot of money to be able to invest into these areas. So why do companies keep investing into these fields? And to give you an example is Apple. So Apple is a computer company, but if you look at the distribution of the revenues right now, less than 9% come from selling computers, and about 60-something% come from selling smartphones. So if they didn't invest in the smartphone arena and this revolutionary innovation that cost them a lot of money, then Apple would have been in a completely different place right now. Also, when you come up with a new product or a new business line, I think you need to validate the key business assumptions as early as possible. I think an entity or a company that did that very brilliantly is Zappos. So Zappos, instead of start investing in warehouses and distribution schemes and electronics for developing the sales online, so they said, let's buy a whole bunch of shoes from a store. Let's develop a very basic website and buy some advertisements with maybe some keywords, and vet the key business assumption which was, are people going to buy shoes online or not? And they did that, and in fact, actually, people were buying shoes. So after they vetted and validated the key business assumption early on, then it was safer for them to engage and spend more money and develop a robust capability that eventually was very successful in the field that they were in. Nowadays, it's not an option to be able to take risks. So you have to take risk, you have to transform, you have to modify. Otherwise, you'll be completely marginalized. I mean, technology is evolving at such a rapid pace and rapid field. It's either you take measured risk, you modify your business models, you modify your what you're doing, or you'll be completely out of the business. You know, it's no longer a reactive mode. You have to be a proactive to be able to lead the competition and to have to take risk in order to remain in the competition anyway. Other things also is when you talk about organizations, we find executives, they say that we need to embrace innovation. We need to come up with innovation concepts and methods, and it tend to fail in the middle management, because when employees come in and suggest new concepts, new ideas, new ways of doing business, so the middle management typically is afraid that if they take this risk or implement these innovations and they fail, then it's going to be reflected negatively on them. So a way to tackle that is for executives actually to enforce that by putting that in the performance evaluation, but also make sure that if it failed, that they have their back. So it's not going to be reflected negatively on them if they achieve or they embark in something innovative and end up not succeeding. And you always have to push the boundaries. If you're playing within the boundaries, you're never going to create new capacity. You're never going to create new environments. And the problem is the closer you get to the boundaries, the more challenges and the more difficulties you get. So you need to learn and create a balance where you're always pushing the boundaries and what you're trying to do to create new value and new products. And people refer to always, you cannot, failure is not an option. You cannot fail. In fact, actually failure is okay. It's not a problem. Actually, a lot of times we'll learn so many things from failures. It's just a matter of fact that you have to do it fast, fail fast, and learn from it. Don't fail in the same mistake. Don't keep repeating the same mistake, and the value will be very valuable. And even in concept of evolution, at the monarch butterflies, at the larva stage, there was a genetic error and mutation that enabled the larva to be able to eat poisonous weed. And because of that, then the butterflies became poisonous. And so the predator weren't able to eat them because they were poisonous. So a small mistake in genetic and mutation was able to save the whole species. So just basically mistakes and error and failures are not necessarily a bad thing. It could be something that we'll learn. It makes us more robust and enable us to do things in a better way, in better capacity as well. The thing now is also there's huge advantages by working across industries. By working across industry, you can work with different industries in your field, by industries outside of the field. You can work with academia, with governments, and create a network of concepts and concept of capabilities will be substantially beyond anything you've had to date. So you can people see how people think differently, how they react to failures, how they create new products, and maybe there's a common synergistic problem that affects everybody. So you can join resources and efforts, and being able to solve it in a much efficient way, cheaper and a faster time. So there is huge values from working collectively across different industries. There is a vast amount of benefits from that. So when astronauts go into space, they look at Earth and they don't see just a single planet, just different boundaries of different countries. They see the whole planet as a whole. And that concept could be applied specifically to strategists. So if you want to do a strategy and see how the industry is behaving, how the industry is evolving, you need to pull yourself up and look at the global level and see how geopolitics is affecting it, how technology is emerging, how the business models is changing, and being able to look at things from a different perspective and globally. So if you approach the problem from a global perspective, I think it will give you much better advantages compared to just being immersed in your industry and looking at it from that way. So many different industries and institutions are creating incredible products. And imagine if we start building bridges. Imagine if we start using our collective intellect to solve some of these challenges and these emerging problems that are affecting all of us across different industries, government and academia. I think the limitations will be endless. Thank you very much.